I believe the same way the buyers are purchasing on Amazon are also impacting the way that they're looking at you and your company. No. Before you knock the idea, just hear me out. Today, I'm interviewing a B2C expert, and he works with companies that are selling to B2C consumers, and he's seeing the same patterns. The interesting thing is that there's a link between that and the B2B world, and I feel that the ones that are doing some of those behaviors from the B2C world are going to win. And here's why. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, I have Josh Koplin. Josh and I got a chance to connect. He's a B2C expert. He works with HVAC companies that are selling to consumers, and their solution tie very closely with that. But I wanted to get this idea of what he's seeing in the B2C world, because the landscape is changing. Amazon changed a whole lot, and just the way that we buy on a B2C side, B2C side changes. But those same behaviors are also, we're seeing them just show up in the B2B world. B2B tend to be behind a little bit on the B2C world, but the same consumers, Mary, that may be purchasing on Amazon for a new, whatever Mary would buy, a new toaster, is also going to be the same Mary that's doing the B2B purchase. And she's going to be wondering, why are those things not congruent? Why can't I get some of the same level of service, same information? And I believe that's changing, especially now. If this is your first time listening to our podcast or watching one of our videos, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll make sure we notify you every time we drop a piece of episode. As we dive in, Josh, you get a chance to hear about him, but he runs an amazing startup in an amazing funding situation, and he comes with a lot of the experience working with consumers. So I feel that his expertise can definitely help us. We dive into this idea of transparency and how and why this is so critical when it comes to us being better sellers. Check it out. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. I feel very strongly about this, that we are witnessing adjustments in the way that people are buying. B2B tend to be a little bit slower than B2C. For instance, when we buy something from a B2B world, we're not expecting the same day delivery as we might with Amazon. However, we are expecting delivery to come a lot faster. But we put up with it more. However, the behavior, the same people who are doing the B2C consuming are also the ones in the offices in those tall buildings, because they're still humans. And some of the behaviors that we're witnessing, and especially as millennials that we grew up with, we want that digital behavior in the B2B world. And we're also looking and expecting companies to do that. And I know we're going to go talk a little bit more about it, but how can we ensure that we some of the things from the B2C world that we can adopt, or our buyers may be wanting, that we as sellers should be delivering? And Josh, I bragged about you a little bit in the teaser there.
Love it.
I bragged about you a little bit in the teaser, and your expertise comes from that B2C world. And I figured, what best way to get an understanding of B2C than talk to somebody who is understanding the expertise of selling to B2C and also helping people sell to B2C. So would that be fair to have a discussion around this?
100%. And it's actually a fascinating one, because what we are doing at Eden, so real quick there, so we are doing something extremely specific, which is essentially modernizing the sales process within the HVAC industry in the residential space. Right, so super specific there. But where this actually gets interesting is that on kind of the general consumer side, we have Amazon, we have CarMax. We are living in the age of instant gratification, and it's really sort of, I want it now, I want it yesterday, one click, done, that kind of paradigm. Now, what's actually interesting with the space that we are dealing with on the HVAC industry and also broader home services overall is that demand is very much there from the consumer side.
Interesting.
However, on the actual home services industry, so that would be kind of imagine your local plumber or your local HVAC contractor coming to fix your AC. Um,
Mhm.
that side of the business is actually has been very slow to modernize compared with all the other parts of our lives that we've come to expect as consumers. So on our side, we are kind of waving the flag of trying to modernize that sales process, saying, look, this is what consumers expect, this is what consumers want, and then kind of bringing that into the the HVAC and the other home services businesses, and kind of pulling things along that way is a little bit of what we're doing. So, I, I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of crossover
Oh my
with
goodness,
with
yeah.
the B2B sector.
So let's dive into the first component because I know we had some notes and I wanted to get uh, like just dive into it. The pricing. This is one that is a lot of controversy on. I go on Amazon and I can see the price. I go to CarMax, I can see the price.
Mhm.
I go to you name it, Uber, I can see the price. Everything is not like the old days with a cab when I jump into a cab and it's like, dude, I don't know if this is going to cost me $15 or it's going to cost me college tuition. Like the
Or
price.
you don't know if the guy's going to be going the long way around.
Yeah, like there's so much. I have no control of it, but there's so much that comes to the buyer. Why is price giving the price online such an important part of the B2C sales process? And how does that translate to the B2B? I know you have a story with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. So I would say that so the first part of the question, why is it so important?
Yeah.
I think that is simply because that is probably one of, if not the first thing on someone's priority list when they are looking to make a purchase, and especially a large ticket
Mm,
purchase item. And we see this really sort of all the time, especially for larger ticket home improvements. Um, as part of actually starting Eden and building out our kind of online pricing tool for the HVAC space, I actually spent a year selling in home. So I was actually one of the guys that would come to your home, crawl through your attic and crawl space and measure out, we're going to, measure the lines from here to there and stuff like that. And then have that kitchen table conversation, is what we
mm,
typically refer to it um, in the industry. But one of the first things that I realized very early on as we were doing this and learning the space is that all the great stuff that I was talking about in home, right? Oh, we are going to put, you know, a mini split head over here. We're going to do this, that, and the other thing. This is what your system's going to look like. We're going to design it this way, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff is going in one ear and out the other until you give somebody a sense of what they're going to be looking at about the price. Because, like you said, they're thinking, great, is this going to cost me an arm or two arms?
mm. So,
And yeah.
no, keep going on that.
No. And I mean, but that is really where the consumer psychology is. It is very much, okay, is this something that I can afford?
Yeah.
What am I looking at for this investment? What am I going to get out of it? But yeah, you're talking about all the stuff that I'm going to get out of it, but what about the actual investment side? And once we have that information as consumers, then we start to become more comfortable. We start to be able to dig into the details. We start to be able to say, okay, maybe I can think about taking that next step in the purchase process. But very much in the consumer world, my perspective is that first and foremost, at least an indication of what you're going to be looking at in terms of the ballpark, that is where the conversation actually starts. And that's
Hmm.
actually how you get deeper into it with any consumer, any prospect that you might be dealing with as a salesperson.
The buyer, you had an experience, and I wanted a B2B experience, and I want to come back on that part. Can you tell us about that with your recent experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Eden, we are a startup, and I don't know how many people listening are too familiar with all the startup software stuff that we have to do, but one of the things we have to do, you have to manage your cap table. So and so is invested in your company, et cetera. What percentage do they own? Stuff like that. And so, really, just about a couple of months ago, we were actually in the market for new cap table management software. And there are a number of players in the space. The gold standard and the market leader in the space is a company called Carta. Obviously, the company itself is not too important. But one of the things that we realized when we went on and were looking around for who do we want to entrust this part of our business to was that in the case of Carta, I go to their pricing page and it was literally, we've got 4 plans available, each one call for a demo.
Oh my
And
goodness.
when you're doing a startup or any other business, really, I assume everybody else listening to this conversation has 20,000 things going on their to-do list for the day. Last thing you want to do is hop on for a sales meeting.
Yeah.
And that was actually what prompted us to say, okay, sure, I get it, card is the gold standard, but are there other options available that can actually just kind of cut down my workload and just give me a sense of what we're actually going to be looking at? And that is actually why when we ended up going down the list in Google and we ended up finding a company called Pulley, one of their competitors kind of snapping at their heels, um,
Mm-hmm.
on their pricing page, they were very transparent. They had the various plans, the various dollar amounts. Here's what you're going to be looking at. If you go above a certain number of seats or things like that, then you know that might be that might warrant different pricing or discussion. But it certainly was easy to get that conversation started, and obviously not the only reason, but it was certainly a large reason why, given our sort of time limited constraint, why we actually ended up going with that different service provider.
So somebody might say, and might say, well, that's because this company is a startup. We're already established. Our clientels are totally different, and this is why we only do call in for the price. What's your take or argument against that?
Yeah, I would say that it really comes down to the consumer driving that demand. And
Hmm.
I would certainly say, you know, you can continue to do that. Absolutely. However, my take would be that that is probably not the smartest way to go about it. Um, Obviously, one example is the story that I just talked about, but it's that by not being transparent, by not putting yourself out there, and at least giving your prospect a sense of what they're going to be looking at, are you actually losing out on business that you might otherwise be able to capture? And
Mm,
is there a added element of trust that you can create online to really kind of get that conversation started? Or in the home services space, as we say, is there something that you can do to get that person to that kitchen table for that conversation?
yeah, because I feel like the other part to this is, but I've had sellers and an old school philosophy that said the people, the customer, us that are buying, that we are only going to make a decision based on the price if we see the price. We're not going to see the value.
Mhm.
Um, is that true?
So, obviously, I think people have different opinions about this, and
Mm-hmm.
overall, the jury probably is still out. Now, I have a take on this, which
Okay.
is what you just mentioned, Donald, is something that we get a whole lot in the home services space,
Mm-hmm.
especially actually from the more kind of the premium priced companies. So in the HV to go a little bit into the HVAC space, you have big established companies that are running lean operations, and you also have some you contractors that you might refer to as Dan in a van or Chuck in a truck. Yeah, that is actually a real thing. But what we actually find when is that when companies in the home services space, when they implement these sort of transparent practices, putting pricing online, putting calculators online, things like that, it is actually these premium companies, they end up doing really, really well.
Mm.
So that is what our data is actually showing us, that the initial reaction for more kind of the premium price companies does end up being, okay, if I put myself out there, if I put my prices out there, then people are just going to price shop and not actually contact me. Is that actually what happens when we look at the empirical data? It turns out the answer, yeah, sure, if you have something out there that is 4 times what the competition is charging, well, probably. But so
Yeah.
long as you are within a reasonable band, within reason, then the answer is that they actually end up doing quite well. And why is that? Our take is that that is because the price part, that is the big question mark that people want to resolve, but the buying decision is actually not made purely off of that. So, in this home services example, when you're talking about homeowners doing upgrades to their homes, they're looking at the reputation of the contractor. They're
Yeah.
certainly looking at Google reviews. How many 5 stars, how many 1 stars? What are people saying there? How long has the company been around? What are their warranty policies? All sorts of things actually do go into that buying decision. So
Yeah.
again, it is really that sort of price piece is what is actually starting the conversation, but it is not, in fact, what is actually closing it.
Yeah, because I feel like for me, from the buyer standpoint, I get the sense I just want to know, can I afford this darn thing in the first place? Like
Absolutely.
I can dance with you for, the demo and all these other meetings, but that's going to probably be like, 3 hours of my time or your time altogether, demo and follow-ups and whatever. Let's just at least say a disco and a demo. Maybe it's an hour on the lower end.
Mm,
Um, and now I am coming to the conversation with you and I don't know still yet. I mean, at the end of the conversation, I've just wasted an hour, you wasted an hour, and I don't, and I'm just finding out now that I can't afford this at all. I think
which is certainly not a service to you or the
no.
salesperson for that matter.
And the crazy part about this is that I'm probably not going to tell anybody else about you at that
Mm-hmm.
point, right? But if you gave me a good experience, you tell me, you help me to understand that, yeah, the price Donald for something like this is, $4,600. In my mind, I was thinking it's gonna be 4K, but I know people spend anywhere between 4 to 6,000. All right, so all right, let me at least go see what they have to offer. This other one is 5,000. Well, let me see their reputation because I could buy something cheaper and save $500, but it's not going to give me reputation, not going to stand up to the claim or whatnot. But I think understanding though, like I think sometimes we get this desperation feeling that if I if I do this, I'm going to lose out. When in actuality, like you're saying, it's almost like this abundance mentality thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the scarcity mindset, and I did an episode with a gentleman recently. It was just phenomenal on this. But I'm going in this thing with this abundance mindset. Yeah, there are opportunities out there. People can self-select. I feel like they're intelligent enough,
Mm-hmm.
and I am not the cheapest. We're definitely not the most expensive, but they'll probably at least give us a shot if they're in market. And if somebody's not in market anyways, how am I going to even convince them? So I'm really should be focused on the people that are in market,
Mm-hmm.
and give them way more reason to look at us, and give them the pricing so they can at least know. And maybe I work with a client in their space. It is very difficult for them to give pricing because
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of customization that has to happen, or depending on the client environment. However, there's still a ballpark range you can give somebody
Yep.
is at, something like this, your size of your company, because you should know by the size of the company. You said anywhere between X dollars and Y dollars. I can't give exact now, but we can, as we get a chance to look underneath the hood, we can
Yep.
go. But this is a price range.
Yep.
I've been rapping there for a little bit. I got passionate about it.
No, no, no. I totally get you. And I think two things I would say to that, especially in cases where maybe you aren't able to give an exact number.
Yeah.
It's, like you mentioned, range is great. Also, what are the variables? What are the main things that can cause the
Mm,
price to go up or down? Being transparent and actually explaining those, taking the time to show people what those are, I think that can also engender that added element of trust as well. And I think the second point about making sure that you put your prices out there, what I might add there is to say, in addition to that, you want to also make sure that you're at the same time that you are surfacing that sort of the $1 million question, how much is it going to cost? You want to be also surfacing what are the things about your product, your company, the experience that make it worth it, that make it unique? What are those selling propositions? Because you can't have one without the other. You can't just
yeah.
talk about the selling propositions without the price tag. At the same time, I would also argue that just putting a price tag out there with absolutely no context, that
Mm-hmm.
is also doing yourself a disservice. And those are kind of two things that really do need to come together in order to provide that experience to the consumer, whether they be a B2B consumer or a B2C consumer, so that they are comfortable in taking that next step.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. Um, I think the conclusion here on this part is be transparent, in
Mm-hmm.
be as transparent as possible. Um, the next point I wanted to tackle, again, going into your expertise on this, AI search and
Big,
and how
big,
it's
big,
changing the
big
game.
topic.
I know. And here's the thing. I don't know if any of you are listening to the same behavior. I might search something on Google, and what I look at is the very first. I don't even go down to the very the very first article anymore. I look and see what AI says,
Hmm.
and the Google summary, and it gives me summary and give me some points. So I'm not even getting past the first, not even the first fold. I'm not getting past the first quarter of the page. Talk to me about that from the B2C standpoint, and then I'm going to make a bridge to the B2B.
Absolutely. So I would say that first of all, AI is just completely changing the game, regardless of where you are, B2C, B2B, home services, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a super exciting time. And when we think about it, thinking back on the past 30 years, so in the 90s, we had the internet come around. At that point in time, whether you were a large business or small, just having a website was probably revolutionary. Then you have the hegemony of Google, which has continued to this day and is continuing as we speak, but also the rise of social and mobile in the late 2000s. That again sort of changed the way that we as consumers interact with businesses, expectations around response times that changed. There's a lot more scrolling, searching, streaming, and then shopping now. And so just consumer behaviors overall have just fundamentally shifted over the past 30 years. And when we actually look back at that, every time there's an inflection in technology, like with the advent of the internet, search engines, then mobile and social, and now AI, that just presents a fantastic opportunity. Both a disruption if you are might be more kind of in the incumbent camp, but a fantastic opportunity for disruption and also just an opportunity to grow your business and really meet those newer consumer behaviors and consumers where they are. So as you can tell, I'm super excited about this topic as I kind of ramble on about it. But in the consumer space, like Donald, you were mentioning, there is a whole lot less scrolling down to the actual organic search engine results
Mm-hmm.
um, than there was a couple of years ago, or maybe even a year ago.
Yeah.
So just
Literally.
literally things have changed. And to give you a very concrete example of what we are seeing in the home services space, it is that only actually about 10% of searchers even go down to the organic search results now.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge, huge change
So
because
90% of them are not going.
90% are not going. Now, I would
Wow.
say that this is a little bit of a special case because most of these are local searches
Yeah.
where they're looking for a local cooling AC contractor near me or whatever it is. And there are those sort of Google Maps that show up, the local businesses, et cetera, et cetera. But in addition to that, yes, AI search is making a huge difference there. And people are really just kind of either going with the AI overviews at the top if they're in
Mm-hmm.
looking for information, or going and looking at those local businesses that come up on local services. Very, very few are now actually going down to look at the SEO results. So huge, huge
Yeah.
paradigm shift.
Sheesh. So here's the crazy part with this now. How does this apply? What are the implications for? Because I'll share part of this, and you could jump in and give some insights there. But as someone that in my own company, I oversee and work with our sales and our marketing team and so forth, and I could see that ramification. We've delved in both world, and we have consultants we work with and so forth. But when it comes to the actuality of somebody searching for our business, it's important for me as a seller to know what's going on in their minds and is there in their behavior. And especially for marketing, it's critical
Mhm.
for me to do this. If I'm going the old way and just say I'm just going to do 10,000 blogs and just make them keyword rich, there's probably some benefit in some way, but since the game has been adjusted so much, it becomes more challenging. You need to create more relevant topic that would be able to people may be searching for. But how does this concept apply to the B2B world right now?
Mhm. Absolutely. And I would say, so let me actually start off answering this
Yeah.
question by talking about sort of how we are talking about this to contractors, which I think actually parallels very much the B2B world.
Okay.
So I brought up this I guess it's kind of industry lingo, the kitchen table conversation. You know, you've you've probably been there on the receiving end of it.
So I
And
actually I did door-to-door security sales at one point, and when I first
so
started
you
off,
were on the giving end of it.
yeah, and on the side of when I very first started my company, one of our first client was an HVAC company. Somebody that heard me in my network that I launched this podcast and was curious about sales and marketing, and he was doing some B2B stuff, and we helped him, but I helped him
Awesome.
back then. It was by myself. But the point is, that kitchen table convo was something that he was doing with his
Yep.
residential clients.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, it is a key part of the sales process. And I mean, that kitchen table conversation literally is the sales demo or the product demo
Mm-hmm.
in the B2B context. Like those two things are absolutely the same. What we have been telling our contractor clients, our customers, people in the home services space, is that as AI and AI search has and is and will be evolving, the best thing, the best sort of North Star that you can have is to put your kitchen table conversation online.
Holy
It
moly.
it really comes down to that. And by that, and when you think about it, I think it makes sense because the kitchen table conversation, that is where all the magic happens. That is where you are acting as a consultant. You are listening to what your customer is interested in, their pain points, what their needs are. And then at the end of the day, you're providing as much useful information as possible to them so that they can make a informed purchase decision, hopefully for your product.
Mm-hmm.
And as we think about AI as an outgrowth of ourselves as consumers, as buyers, whether that be in the B2B or the B2C context, what AI is looking for is what is going to be useful to my user, the person that's using me as the AI to try and find out this information. And again, that all comes down to all the stuff that you're talking about at the kitchen table. How can you make that digestible? How can you make that useful? If somebody is searching for information online, how can you make that as easy as possible for AI to pick up on so that
Mm.
one, you actually do end up in those AI overviews, but secondly, the more of that useful information that you have out there, and the more that you structure it, obviously there are some technical things that you want to go through with your website about having fast load times and making sure the content is up to date and you don't have old stuff on there. There are a bunch of other things that do go into it, but conceptually speaking, the more of that quote unquote kitchen table conversation that you can put online, the more that you can be helpful to somebody that may be searching for information, then that is really in our view, at a high level, that is really the way that you can get picked up in this new search paradigm.
Yeah, very interesting the concept, and I think the notion of the adjusting our paradigm, but also doing sharing what the buyer is looking for. Like instead of me saying, because I know when I go search for something using AI, I'm being very like practical, right? How do I change the tire on a I don't know, Triton bicycle? I'm making this up, but
Mm.
like now I am very curious about that particular thing, and I think and I don't know this, but I feel like sometimes the marketing teams are just so outdated with stuff that they're used to, like 10 ways to buy a
Mm-hmm.
bicycle. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that doesn't get me interested. Give me some very practical stuff. And I think that could help us in the B2B world. And go back to if we were going to use a CRM example or make that up, or the tool that you guys were using, if I'm early stage and I'm just trying to find information on that, I want to get very maybe the best way to provide information for my my investors or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the topic. But I think there's some alignment that needs to happen there, and I hate using that term so like because it gets so overused, right? But the sales and marketing just need to have a dialogue and and this needs to be a one avenue, not so much as your camp and my camp, but we are both tackling the same thing. And with AI changes, it's just we just got to get on the same page. We got to catch up fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the example that you brought up about really being as helpful as possible to whoever is looking for something, that also goes back to creating again, I feel like I'm coming back to this, to the T word, the trust word,
Oh boy, there
right?
we go. Let's do it. Let's do
Right?
it.
Because, you know, it it takes a certain number of touches for somebody to become comfortable with your brand, with your company, with your product. And the more of those touches there are, and Donald, you probably know this number better than I do, but I think what I've heard is around 7 touches at least until somebody actually starts to really kind of internalize and recognize you or your company or your brand.
Hmm.
And the more that you can have, especially when people are may not necessarily be in that exact purchase mode, but before that, and in whatever media that may be in. This is perhaps a little bit of a different topic, but as our behaviors have shifted from that very sort of traditional funnel diagram that's been kind of ingrained into us to saying that so much of what we do as consumers is happening within the streaming world, within the searching world, within the scrolling world, within the shopping world. Those are kind of the four S's,
Hmm.
right? Having as many of those touch points as possible can then increase your visibility to consumers, get them more comfortable, and when they do actually start thinking about that purchase process, then you're going to be top of mind for them.
100%. Tying back to this part, and I want to be cognizant of time here, but the zero click search, do you mind telling us just a little bit more about what that is? And because I know this relates very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we have actually started talking about, in addition to zero-click searches, is zero-click conversions. So that's maybe a little bit more kind of futuristic, but I certainly believe that it is coming if it is not already here. But
Explain that. What
yeah,
is that exactly?
yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, let's start with zero-click searches.
All right.
So the zero-click search is literally when you type something in Google or ChatGPT, gives you an answer, and then you literally do not click through. So it used to be that when you type something into Google, you would get a bunch of different results. Um, some of the websites that, ideally, the websites that come towards the top were probably closer to what you were looking at, and then you would basically click through to that website, and then ultimately you would hopefully find your answer or whatever you were looking for, whether it's information, a product, what have you. Maybe if you didn't, you would move on to the next one.
Hmm.
And the zero-click searches are literally those AI overviews, for instance, that come up at the top of Google, where you search for something, you get an answer right in that search engine window, and then you actually do not continue on to any of the websites. So
Hmm.
it is a very much paradigm shift compared to what we were doing even just a couple of years ago when we were thinking about search and then appearing to searchers when they were searching for a company, a product, or information.
Yeah. Interesting. And then, so now the conversion side, how does that piece tie in? Zero.
Yeah, so zero-click conversions. This gets even more interesting and or scary depending on your perspective.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
but
Buckle up, guys.
but that is when we start talking about, say, like an AI agent. Just so if, and they are coming out with these now, where you are able to say, look, I want you to find a highly rated heating contractor near me. I need my AC turned up, and book an appointment for me. Here's my calendar. Go.
Dude.
And then goes out, books that appointment for you. That would be a zero-click conversion. Now, you know, obviously things are not quite there yet, but things are moving along very, very quickly. And I believe there are some things out there that have gotten pretty close to that.
Hmm.
But from the consumer perspective, you can see how that would be very attractive.
Of course. And I think the further the consumers get away from the B2B side, the process, we are going to demand more from the B2B side. Like, it's like, come on, catch up. If it takes us 6 month, 6 days to get a package delivered, we're like, how in the world Amazon is doing this so quickly? Can't your company get us, deliver something to our business, supplies or whatever, quicker? And I think this demand is only going to continue to increase. So the B2B side, how can we get ahead of that? How can I, if my competitors are taking 6 weeks to get something, can I get something to someone a little bit quicker? And you might say, well, it's the shipping. Well, can we adjust that? Like Amazon's getting products again from overseas, same thing. Can't we still get that fixed. And I really strongly believe, along what you're saying, that demand is going to continue to creep over,
Absolutely.
because it's the same people buying on both sides.
Exactly. Your expectations get set by one. So
Mm-hmm.
once you've been conditioned in one realm, then that is definitely going to seep through. And water flows through to the path of least resistance.
Amen. Amen. I'm telling you, shoot, our team's listening to this episode. We're applying some of these things. Listen, Josh, I so enjoyed our conversation today. So many great insights. If there's one major thing you want people to leave with, what's that one major piece of insight for a B2B seller or sales leader?
I think I might go with the B2B equivalent of putting your kitchen table conversation online.
Mm,
That is the direction that AI is going. That is the direction that consumers are going. Overall, the more helpful that you can be online, the more you can provide that transparency. Really, whatever you go through on that demo that can build that value together with providing that transparency to consumers or
yeah,
to your buyers in that B2B context, then I think that is what you really want to be doing.
yeah, absolutely love it. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show. Folks want to get in touch with you to learn about you or even your amazing solution. What's the best way for them to connect with you, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. So my email, josh.koplin, Josh dot Koplin at e-den homes, eden homes, homes.com. So if there happen to be any HVAC business owners out there that might be listening to this, give me a holler.
Let's go. Check it out. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today. Truly appreciate it, Josh.
Hey, had a blast. Thanks so much, Donald.
Have a good one. That was Josh Koplin. I'm telling you, connect with Josh. You can find him on LinkedIn. You can find his details down below. Tell him that you heard him here on the Sales Evangelist podcast. And I love the concept specifically, especially when we're closing out there, that it's just the buyer behavior is changing. For me, I feel transparency is one of those things that just is crucial, especially when it comes to the price. Things that we're adjusting internally within our organization so we can be better in providing that information to you, as well as when it comes to our production company, Blue Mango Studios. It's just basics, right? We want to behave the same way, and I love this idea about the demo. One of the last things he talked about was the kitchen table is different, and we've talked about this on previous episode. If I have to schedule an hour-long demo to get to see your product, then you missed the boat, because I'm going to go look at somebody else, especially if I'm in market. I just don't have that time. And the same thing that he mentioned as well. Listen, it's a fantastic episode. See how you can apply this to your organization. If you'd like to connect with me or to connect with some of our content or join us for one of our masterminds, go to thesalesevangelist.com/mastermind. Again, thesalesevangelist.com/mastermind. As always, I want you to thrive. I want you to succeed. I want you to raise your level of thinking. But most importantly, I want you to go out and do big things. See you on the next one.